Good evening. We are here on day 24, chapter 24 of Proverbs. Welcome with wisdom. Let's get into it. Been a big day for me. We've just finished up with youth. We're now getting into sermon prep time for tomorrow later, but so happy to be able to do this in between. Father, I just want to thank you for this chapter. It's got my favorite verse in it from Proverbs, and just want to thank you for all of the things that we can be blessed by within your word, and particularly within the wisdom literature. Father, help us to incorporate these sayings into our lives. Help us to walk the walk, not just to talk the talk. And may they be to our benefit and to those around us. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, chapter 24, verse 1 and 2. So this is two verses together. Do not envy evil people. Do not desire to be with them. For their lips contemplate violence, and for their hearts contemplate violence, and their lips speak harm. Okay, so it's just another one of those proverbs of association. Notice that there's that style that we're still in the sayings of the wise from that started back in chapter 22 verse 17. The style is different, like they're more kind of directions at this point. Just let me check that we're live on the Book of Faces, and yep, we are. Just turn that down. So we are live on the Book of Faces, and that means that we'll probably be live on YouTube as well. So, again, by association, we're drawn to the same sort of principles as people. That doesn't mean we don't associate for the purpose of reaching people and influencing them towards God. But, Jesus did. Jesus, hung out with all sorts of people that he was trying to share the gospel with. But we don't envy them. We don't hang around with those people with a heart of, hey, I want what they have. No, I want to share what I have, which is Jesus. Verse 3 and 4, by wisdom a house is built, and through understanding it is established. By knowledge its rooms are filled with all kinds of precious and pleasing treasures. So you've got several layers here. So by wisdom a house is built. That you've got the literal sense through an understanding of architecture and engineering, and like houses are not built without these principles of engineering, architecture, and whatnot. But a house is a stand-in. It's it also represents the home. So a home includes a family, and it includes the not just the social side of things, the relationships of the family. It includes the finances and everything like that. So by wisdom, a house is built, not just the physical, but the people that fill it, and the culture of that house. It requires wisdom to have a strong marriage, to be good parents, to build the economy of the house, to build the influence of the house and the family name. So by knowledge its rooms are filled with all kinds of precious and pleasing treasures. What are these treasures? Well, they're the people, the children, the occupants of the house. Not just the things you put on the shelf. It's the human treasures that are brought about by wisdom and knowledge. That doesn't just mean, natural-born children. That would include foster children. It could include adopted children. It could include stepchildren, etc. So wisdom is essential in growing a family, growing and maintaining and flourishing a family. Verse 5 and 6... No, this one goes down. Yeah, verse 5 and 6. A wise warrior is strong. A man of knowledge makes his strength stronger. For with guidance you wage your war, and with numerous advisors there is victory. So I think one translation says a multitude of advisors, a multitude of counselors. So there is, two parts to this. There's the wisdom. If you're waging war, wisdom will beckon you to towards increasing the things that help you to wage war. So that would be strength, that would be your martial skill, that would be the your capability with various types of weaponry, and your understanding of tactics and strategy. I want to just, while I'm talking on that, there's a difference between tactics and strategy. A lot of people might not know the nuanced difference. Tactics are what you might are the sort of things that you might want to use in a certain situation to achieve a goal in that situation. So that's the tactics. Tactics would be what you would implement in a battle to win that battle. Strategy is far more overreaching and it extends towards the principles of, okay, now it's not just the battle, but I have, what is my goal what are my goals to achieve victory in a war, in a longer spanning war, which wars are made up of a series of battles, mostly. Sometimes a war could be won in a single battle, I suppose. But that's the difference between tactics and strategy. And some people are great tacticians but not good strategists. Some people are good strategists but not very good tacticians. And some people are good at both or good at neither. So just that's the idea of tactics and strategy. So a wise warrior is someone who is going to make themselves better at the art of war. They might even read Sun Tzu, The Art of War, which is a very good book if you're wanting to, understand how to wage war. I've read it, most of it, and it's a good book. It's very similar to Proverbs, actually. It's a lot of these, pithy little statements about but focused on warfare. So it's like the Proverbs of war. Verse 6 goes another step and says, "For with guidance you wage your war, and with numerous advisors there is victory." So this is moving towards, the first part is saying if you're wanting to be good at war, you're going to increase your prowess at war. And this is saying if you want to be good at victory, you're going to surround yourselves with people who are going to share how to win. And so you need guidance, you need multitude of advisors, multitude of counselors who are going to, and you want to choose people who are victorious themselves. You don't want to choose to have as your advisory committee, if you're going to wage war, you don't want to be surrounding yourself with people who have only excelled at losing wars, or their only experience is losing wars, unless you're listening to them about what not to do, what didn't work for them. So what is the wars that we get involved with in our day-to-day life? I mean, well, there are literal wars in this world, and they're tragic, whether it's Ukraine and Russia, whether it's Israel and Gaza, whether it's the civil wars in places like Yemen or Somalia, or in West Africa. These are type of wars that we think of when we think of war, but we have battles in our day-to-day life. We have battles against, people who might be out to get us, like interpersonal battles. People who don't like us for whatever reason. It could be, personal reason. It could be they could dislike us because of a grudge that they hold, or, it could be prejudice. It could be something outside of our control. It could be our immutable characteristics that has really driven someone. It could be our ideology. It could be the fact that you are a different class status than them, and society does have these class statuses. Maybe they resent you for, something or other that you you've done, but not to them. So there's many things that we get into interpersonal conflicts with. But then there's beyond that. There's kind of abstract wars that we wage. We wage wars against things like inflation, things like the ever looming prospect of poverty in a society where wealth is becoming more and more tipped to one side. And I'm not speaking about that as an anti-capitalist. I believe that capitalism is a very vastly superior mechanism for lifting people out of poverty than socialism. But I'm just saying that you've got, just like socialism tips towards an oligarchical system, so does capitalism tip towards a cronyist idea. So we wage war against forces that are outside of our control, just in the economic world. And we wage war spiritually. We wage war spiritually against, like, our true fight is not against flesh and blood. It's against principalities and powers, and these forces of darkness in the world. And so if we're wanting to be a wise warrior, we're going to make ourselves strong. What are we going to make ourselves strong in? We're going to make ourselves strong in all of the different battles that we're going to face. If we're facing economic battles, we want to make ourselves wise in how to use our money. If we're looking at the spiritual battles, we want to be strong in faith, in prayer, in the Word, the sword of the Spirit, the Word of God. If we are looking at waging battles in our workplaces or in our family, we want to build our EQ. We want to build our conflict resolution, arsenal of how to understand and navigate. So being a wise warrior makes you want to do those things. And we also want to find guidance. So guidance can be actual people who come and give you advice, maybe a counselor, a pastor, or a friend, a trusted mentor. It can also be books that we read. The books that we read, you are the books that you read. And, the Bible is one that we're reading today. But there are good books, like if you're looking at interpersonal conflict, and you might be struggling with that, a great book that I often recommend to people to just as a starter. If you have never read Boundaries by Cloud and Townend, you should read it, because it is a great book that deals with how to just have just normal boundaries, healthy boundaries in everyday relationships. And most people don't know how to have healthy boundaries because they were not taught by their parents. And so, this is a good book to read from that perspective. So the books that you read will help you as a warrior and growing strong as a warrior. All right, let's move on. Verse 7. Wisdom is... I'll just open the chat just in case anyone says anything. Wisdom is unattainable for a fool in court. In court he does not open his mouth. So wisdom is unattainable for a fool. It's not that it's unattainable in the sense that it's not available, but a fool, someone who's set on that foolish quest or path, they can't recognize it when it's staring them in the face. Like if you go, for example, to the letter of John, it doesn't use the word fool there. It uses blind. So a blind person can't see the things that are glaringly in front of them. And so a fool, it's unattainable because they haven't been healed of the foolishness. A fool has to let go of being a fool and not be a fool anymore, and then they can attain wisdom. In court he does not open his mouth. This idea is of a fool outside of his element. Like they won't open their mouth because they know that they're out of their depth. They don't have the ability to speak in a way that is going to be intelligent against whatever has come their way. And I've seen that. I've seen people who just, for all of their, brashness and braggadociousness, when they get confronted with a situation that exposes their folly, their ignorance, whatever, they just clam up. And so, this might be a little bit relevant to the verses before about warfare, because, a fool doesn't prepare. A fool doesn't prepare for the situations they might get into. Verse 8, the one who plans to do evil will be called a scheming person. A foolish scheme is sin, verse 9, and the scorner is an abomination to people. Okay, so the one who plans to do evil will be called a scheming person, and a foolish scheme is sin. So I think these two are connected, like so many of the ones that we've seen. So it's really a self-evident proverb. It's just, if you plan to do evil, you'll be called a person who plans to do evil. And foolish schemes are sin because they're there to harm people. Verse 10, if you faint in the day of trouble, your strength is small. So I've known people who are small of stature, people that you would not automatically think that's a person there with strength and fortitude and perseverance. But in times of crisis, I've seen those same people step up and really take charge, male and female. And I've seen people who are, like heavy, like they're the sort of people that you wouldn't want to go up against. You'd think you wouldn't want to go up against in a fight. But I've seen them become kind of like that person in the court. They just like clam up. When I was in the Navy, we went through a lot of, recruit school takes you through the ringer on a lot of things. I was physically not a very strong person. I still wouldn't class myself in, any weight category championships. But what happened was that the people who were really good at like physical education, like physical training, PT, the people who were great at PT, they weren't always the people who were going to be great when we went and we did firefighting training, or when we did biological chemical NBC, nuclear biological chemical training, or when we had to do sea survivability. They were not the people who naturally stepped up to lead. And so it was left to some of us others who were the cool heads in the matter to take leadership. I remember there was one where we were out doing sea survivability. They put us out on a raft in the middle of nowhere, and the goal is you've got to try and survive and get to where you're supposed to get to. And we figured out which way we were supposed to get to, but there's that whole thing of too many cooks and too many chiefs, and they were trying to. Everyone was suggesting different ideas, and I just waited until it was all, it was obvious that most of those ideas weren't going to work, so I just waited until they didn't. And then I'm like, okay, let's try this. And but we've all got to work together, so it just ended up having to be someone who was like, saying stroke, and then everyone would paddle, no matter what part of the raft we're on, everyone would paddle in a certain way. Stroke, and we managed to get to where we needed to go, but it just had to, like, it's like those in the old old galleys. There had to be someone who would hit the drum for the oars to go, and they would, speed up. So that was, it's not always the person you think is going to be the leader who is the leader. And so if you faint in the day of trouble, your strength is small. True strength is not physical. True strength is a strength of character. It's an inner strength. Verse 11, deliver those being taken away to death and hold back those slipping to the slaughter. So deliver those being taken. So this is what the gospel is about. It's about delivering people who are on their way to death. Our job is delivery from, Jesus is the ultimate deliverer, but as gospel workers, we are deliverers as well. And so we're to deliver those, everyone, like that's everyone. Everyone who is born into this world is being taken away to death and slipping to the slaughter. So when we save someone, when we deliver someone, it's a key thing. It's a massive thing, and we don't often acknowledge that how big that is for people. Verse 12. If you say, but we did not know about this, does not the one who evaluates hearts consider? Does not the one who guards your life know? Will he not repay each person according to his deeds? Ignorance is no defense. Ignorance is no defense. We often, Now it can, that's a saying that goes around. Sometimes you can get a slap on the wrist if you didn't know something. I once had a traffic ticket that was regarding a sign that had been obscured, and I proved that it was not visible in any way. I was able to get away with that, but get out of that. It was a mistake, but you know, God knows the hearts. God knows our hearts, and He's going to sift through. And I think there might be some element where this is pointing back to, the delivering people from death. We can't just say, well, I didn't know I should have helped people. We can't say those sort of things, because God knows. God's going to, and I love it that He's called the one who guards your life. The one who guards your life knows, and He's going to repay each person according to his deeds or lack thereof. We know this from the parable of the talents. We know this from parables that Jesus tells, that God will repay according to our deeds or lack thereof. And so we shouldn't be looking at it going, okay, how am I going to get out of this? How am I going to, I'll just say I didn't know. The thing is that you have the Spirit, you have the Word. You're not going to be judged on what you knew. You'll also be judged on what you had the capacity to learn. So if you had your Bible and it just sat on a shelf all your life, and you claim to be a follower of Jesus, you're going to be looked at, and in a very there's those people who sadly get told, "I did not know you. Go into depart from me. I did not know you." These are people who said, "I did things in your name, Jesus. I did things," and we could think of Judas. Judas cast out demons. He performed miracles, but his Bible was left on the shelf. He wasn't making it a habit of learning from God and understanding God. And so it's not going to be a defense in the final judgment to say, "Oh, I didn't know," if you had access to know. Verse 13, "Eat honey, my child, for it is good, and honey from the honeycomb is sweet to your taste." Likewise, verse 14, "Know that wisdom is sweet to your soul. If you find it, you will have a future, and your hope will not be cut off." This is, I like the imagery here, because I really do like eating honey from a honeycomb. I love to just, it's not often that I do it, but sometimes you're at the markets and they have those little plastic containers with honeycomb in it. And I love just cutting a little piece of honeycomb and chewing on it. You get to chew the wax, and you get all of that honey coming. And so, it's sweet. It's good to taste. And wisdom is like that to your soul. Have you been finding that? Put a note when you watch this. Have you been finding that wisdom over the course of this month has been sweet to your soul? I have. I've been thoroughly enjoying this series. Even the day that I was exhausted, I still enjoyed going through that chapter. So, what do you find what do you get when you find wisdom? You find that you have, "Hey Sammy, good to see you." You have a future, and your hope will not be cut off. Your hope will not be cut off. I don't know who's watching. I'm getting, it says that there's 5 watching on one platform, 2 on another, and those might not be accurate either, because another platform says that I've got overall 1 watching, but that it doesn't add up. Anyway, please let me know how you're going if you're watching. So your hope won't be cut off if you find wisdom. That's one of the greatest endorsements of what we're doing. Is we are on that path to having a hope that will never be cut off. Verse 15, "Do not lie in wait like the wicked against the place where the righteous live. Do not assault his home." So this, is talking about ambush. And, physically, don't ambush people. But also metaphorically, people try to ambush. It's that tall poppy thing that we have in Australia. People like to cut down the tall poppy. People like to cut down the person who is achieving, who is successful, especially if there's a moral component as well. If that person has some sort of a claim to moral high ground, even better if we can show that they're a sinner as well. I mean, I don't know anyone who's claimed I mean, I have met people who've claimed them, and you'll have to see when I do part 2 of my testimony. I'll talk about that. But I think of I can't even remember. We get so many prime ministers. Anyway, the one that went to Hillsong, it'll come to me. Our previous prime minister. So he was a Christian, and so it was like the media's obsession to find. Now he had problems, like no one would claim that he's perfect. I didn't like him by the end of it either, but it was like an obsession with some people to find something bad about this guy, and it's the same thing with the righteous today. Like we can get caught up in that within the church. We can get caught up with that because we're like, well, that person has a position that I don't have, and I don't like that I don't have that, so therefore I'm going to cut them down. I'm going to lie in wait. I'm going to try and find something about them, about some action they've done, some character. I was recently having it was a conflict resolution, a part of a conflict resolution process with someone, where I was trying to mediate something between a person and another person, and the person who was the respondent, I guess you could say, were throwing up things from my past that I have done that they didn't agree with, and I'm like, well, okay, sure, but what does that have to do with the price of rice in China? Like it doesn't impact what's going on today, and this is what we often do. We're like, let's try and minimize our own issues by finding fault in someone whom God has sent as a messenger for a particular cause. So don't do that. Don't do that. Now we're at my favorite verse. So we're finally at my favorite verse in Proverbs, verse 16. And this actually, when I went through this today, this actually I think is in line with the verse before it. So I want to go through it how I've always understood it, and then I want to unpackage some of the deeper meaning if you connect it to verse 15 that we just read. Although a righteous person may fall 7 times, he gets up again, but the wicked will be brought down by calamity. So the wicked and the righteous person have something in common here. And I love that this verse is like an equalizing verse. Every person, righteous or wicked, fall down. Okay, they fall down. That's what it means. It means that they both fall down. The only difference between a righteous person and a wicked person is that the righteous person gets back up. And so you can think of Peter. The obvious one is Peter when he sinks beneath the waves. He's looking at Jesus. He's a righteous person. He's looking at Jesus, and Jesus has bid him, "Come, get out of the boat and come to me." So he gets out of the boat. He's walking on the water. And when we think of walking on the water, we're thinking, we often think of still water. This was not still. This was water that was moving mountains. This was, imagine a mound that is moving, because that's what it was. This was swell. This was rocking the boat. This was in a storm. And so Jesus is walking, he's not walking just quietly. He's walking up and down, and there's a wave that's, obscuring him. And so when they're looking and going, it looks like a ghost, that's because they're seeing this figure, and then they wouldn't see him because there was a wave in the way. And then they're seeing him again, and now he's over here, and he's just walking, and they call out to him. So like when Peter gets out of the boat's doing this. And he's getting out, and he's stepping on the water, and he's going up, and he's going down, and he's going up just towards Jesus. And then he stops looking, and he starts to sink. And he says, "Lord, help me!" And he gets back up. That's the difference. Judas fell, and he stayed down. Judas fell, and he stayed down. Peter fell that same night. He fell, denied Jesus 3 times. And he got back up. He got back up, and he wept over it. He went to this, like he was in the room when Jesus appeared to them after the road to Emmaus with the 2 disciples there. Jesus, Peter got back up. That's the only difference between Peter and Judas's journey, is that one stayed down, one got back up. And I love it because this is the gospel. This is the gospel. You don't get up and by your own power. Peter's the evidence of that. It's Jesus. You call out, Lord help me, and he picks you back up. But both of us fall down, the wicked and the righteous, but one of us says, help me get back up. And they get up again. If you want a great kind of a upbeat song about this idea, it's by Dan Brems, Bremnes, is how to spell his name, and it's called Up Again. Okay, I love that song. It's just got such a good beat. It's got such a good message, and it's about this idea of get up again. So go and listen to that on YouTube, Spotify, whatever later. But this verse is like it's just the picture of the gospel. Now, I've heard some people say, well, this is not falling into sin. This is falling, tripping over an obstacle or a calamity. Well, actually, yeah, the word fall can mean for sin. It definitely can mean that. But if you connect it to verse 15, it almost certainly is about sin. So, do not lie in wait like the wicked against the place where the righteous live. Do not assault his home. Although a righteous person may fall down, so although you might see them fall down, this is why we need to be a lot more gracious about the people around us. Although a righteous person may fall down 7 times, he gets back up. He gets up again. But the wicked will be brought down by calamity. So, and I really want, if you want to see something dazzlingly eye-opening about the gospel, just a picture of the gospel in the Bible that you probably have never seen before, watch tomorrow or come tomorrow to Border Church, where I talk about the introduction to 1 Corinthians. I'll be dealing with 1 Corinthians 1 verse 1 to 17. So chapter 1 verse 1 to 17. And there is a little detail in that is just mind-blowing about this idea of don't give up on people around you, because you don't know you don't know what God is doing and working in their lives. And so if you see a person trip over, you might think, hey, I can pile on that person because that person did X, Y, Z to me at some point, or I saw them do, whatever. And they deserve to be brought down. Like, yeah, well, so do all of us, But instead of that, instead of being an ambush person, maybe you are an instrument God could be using to pick that person up. Maybe you are a person like Peter. After he's been picked up so many times by God, he goes to the man at the gate of the temple after Jesus is raised to life and the Holy Spirit has fallen, and he says, I don't have silver, I don't have gold, but I'll give you what I have. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, get up and walk. And so he heals this man, and he gets up. So how do you know that you're not meant to be an instrument in that person that you're watching, waiting for some sort of a stumble? How do you know that you're not meant to be an instrument in that person's rising up? I just love these two verses together. Don't lie in wait. Lie ready to help would be the opposite of that. Anyway, so verse 17 does continue. Verse 17 and 18. So do not rejoice when your enemy falls. This continues the thought. Do not rejoice when your enemy falls, and when he stumbles, do not let your heart rejoice, lest the Lord see it and be displeased. Why? Because the Lord is not there waiting for people to stumble to say, "Ha, gotcha." What is God ready to do when someone falls? He's ready to pick them back up. That's what he wants to do for every single person. It's not in his, he's not willing that any should perish. So when we delight, and this is something that, I mean, there's times that I've felt what the Germans call Schadenfreude, like a pleasure at someone else's misfortune is what it means, and we don't have a single word for that in English. But I've felt Schadenfreude at certain things, and I think that you can. Not about a person in their individuality, but I think that you can be rejoiceful when an ideological idea falls apart. Like in America and around the world, even in Australia, the idea of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, where people are being they're being judged not according to the content of their character, but according to the color of their skin, according to their ethnicity or their sexuality, expressed sexuality or expressed, mental health disorder, claiming to be a sex that they're not. Like these are things that have swept into the last decade or more of public life in the West, but we're seeing the fall of that, and I couldn't be happier about that. But when it's a person, and they're going through, like, for example, what did I see recently? I saw there was a pastor who had become known, and I did have my own concerns about this person. He marched in Black Lives Matter rallies, and he seemed to be supportive of certain government measures that I disagreed with. But I've recently come to understand that I was not seeing the nuance of this, and I will be making a public apology on his space very soon for anything that I've said, just as an example for people to learn how to apologize for getting stuff wrong. I'm just waiting for this other part to be over. But he recently lost his brother in a tragic accident, and I saw people piling on him, kind of rejoicing about this calamity that had happened to his family, and I was sickened internally. I'm like, even if I still thought that he was like the most loony left-wing, nutter that whatever, how could you ever think that it's okay to do that? Like, I mean, you've got to be sick in the head to rejoice in someone else losing a loved one, and so like, I can't understand how that happens in the church. I really can't. And God is definitely displeased by it. Verse 19: Do not fret because of evil. Do not fret because of evil people, or be envious of wicked people, for the evil person has no future, and the lamp of the wicked will be extinguished. This is very similar to the first verse we read, except it goes on to say that their end will be extinguished, which we know very clearly. Let's go to verse 21. Fear Yahweh, my child, as well as the king, and do not associate with rebels, for suddenly their destruction will overtake them, and who knows the ruinous judgment both Yahweh and the king can bring. So, don't associate with rebels. So it starts by saying, fear Yahweh and the king. So fear Yahweh, and here the king is, Solomon. It's whoever's sitting on the Davidic throne, likely, because Solomon is compiling this, or someone is compiling this as part of Solomon's retinue of Proverbs. And so it says, fear Yahweh as well as the king. Do not associate with rebels against either Yahweh or the king, because destruction can overtake them, and who knows what either Yahweh or the king can bring. So let's unpackage this one a little bit. Rebellion is not good. And the assumption here is that Yahweh and the king are on the same side. So if you go against the king, you're going against Yahweh. If you go against Yahweh, you're going against the king. Now, I would say that the same caveat applies here as it applies when it comes to honor your mother and father. That's the fifth commandment. But when Paul talks about it, it says in his letters, he says, "Oh, children, obey your parents in the Lord." So in the Lord. So in your insofar as they are asking you to do things that are, obedient to God. If your parents instruct you to disobey God, then you shouldn't obey that. And you would be dishonoring them to obey that, because honor is really something that comes from God. You honor them by being the best you can be. The same thing applies with the king. And Paul talks about honoring the king, but it would only be within the context of where the king doesn't ask you to do things that are outside of what God asks you to do. If the king was to ask you to do something contrary to what God asks you to do, then you would be okay, and it wouldn't be rebellion, because rebellion has a hierarchy. You obey God first, and then other tiers of authority. And so don't be associating with a rebellious person means don't be associating with someone who is just has anarchist or anti authority leanings. Now, I've been accused many times of being anti-authority. What I am is anti-authoritarian, and that's different. If you're opposed to control and force and coercion, that's different to being opposed to the right exercise of power. And so I've definitely I was raised, as to be a champion of the little guy. That was what my mum raised me to do, and she wasn't even someone who instilled Christian values, but that was a value that I think carries over. That's what I see with Jesus. Jesus was anti-authoritarian, but he wasn't anti-authority. So he could, with one breath, say, and this happened on the same day. He's saying, "Woe to you, Pharisees and Sadducees! Woe to you, Pharisees, hypocrites!" He's calling them hypocrites over and over again in Matthew, I think it's 23. And so on that same day that he says that, "Woe to you, Pharisees," and he describes all of their excesses, he says to a widow who has given her last penny into the coffer of the temple, which goes to pay the salary of the very people he's criticizing. He says, "Good on you. This person has given more than the rich person who gives only a small percentage of their income. Her faith is great, and she deserves to be known about. And we do know about her because of the gospel story." So, with one breath, he's extolling the authority that's been vested in the temple, and with the other breath, he's chastising the people who are abusing authority. So, you see that in Jesus himself. So don't associate with rebels who are people who are rebellious without a cause. You can be rebels with a cause if that cause is just and righteous. Okay, and so now we move to another section of Proverbs. It's called The Further Sayings of the Wise, and it starts with this preamble. These sayings are also from the wise. So again, could be compiled by Solomon, could be compiled by someone after Solomon. That's okay. A lot of these things were edited and did have different parts added and stuff. Doesn't detract from their inspirations and their inspired status, because they've become utilized by the community of faith. So here we get in verse 23. These sayings are also from the wise. To show partiality in judgment is terrible. The one who says to the guilty, "You are innocent," peoples will curse him and nations will denounce him. We see that. We see that today. People who are biased in judgment, they don't just get a bad reputation in their local setting because of social media, because of the way that things travel. Things that happen on a local level can be denounced by someone in another country, and so, or a leader of another country even. So don't show partiality. It's because not only will you get God's curse, but you'll be cursed by other people. And it continues by saying in verse 25, "But there will be delight for those who convict the guilty, and a pleasant blessing will come on them." Okay, so, be faithful in judging. Use your discernment wisely. Don't seek to defraud justice. Verse 26, that like a kiss on the lips is the one who gives an honest answer. That's really cool. So like a kiss on the lips. So the kiss on the lips, this is not talking about a passionate, erotic kiss. This is probably more like talking about the kiss of greeting that would happen in the culture that we're reading about. So, when Judas approached Jesus, he gave a kiss, and that was a greeting kiss, and that was the signal, this is the one to arrest. The Bible says, greet one another with a holy kiss. Even today in countries in that area, greetings happen with kisses, and they can even be kisses from lips to lips that have no passion. There's nothing erotic about them. And so it's basically like an intimate kiss. You wouldn't just go and kiss a random stranger. You reserve these for close connections, brothers and close friends. And so like a kiss on the lips, so like a greeting, an intimate greeting is the one who gives a honest answer. So it's something that is welcomed. It's a welcome, refreshing. It's secure. It has security. When you're greeting a friend, a close friend, there's a security to that friendship. So verse 27, establish your work outside and get your fields ready. Afterward, build your house. So afterward, build your house, because if you don't plant, you're not going to have stuff to eat while you build. Like if you build the house and then winter comes and there's no food, okay, you're going to die. You're going to starve to death in an empty house. It's saying focus on the priorities of your day-to-day needs. It's basically like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You just look it up on Google, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. People, if they're not getting their basic sustenance, food and water, they're not going to be interested in, what they believe about God. So when you approach someone who is in dire straits, don't try and give them a sermon. Don't try and give them a Bible study. Give them a sandwich. That's the gospel as well. Give them a sandwich, help them out, and then they might be interested in listening to what you have to say about things. Probably before giving them the gospel, give them tools to be able to go beyond needing to beg for food, or they might be too proud to beg, but needing food to survive, to the point where they're able to function, and then you can share the gospel. So focus on things in a priority that is logical and common sense. Verse 28, do not be a witness against your neighbor without cause, and do not deceive with your words. Do not say, I will do to him just as he has done to me. I will pay him back according to what he has done. So these two verses are connected, 28 and 29. So do not be a witness against your neighbor without cause. First of all, like it's like the idea of don't poop in your sandbox. Don't take a dump in where you play, because you're going to have to play with that. So if your neighbor is definitely up to something really bad, then like if there's domestic violence or something like that, definitely report it. Definitely report it if there's abuse going on. But if there's no cause and it's just kind of like, okay, they had a party once or twice. I mean, if it's ongoing, yes, that would be a cause. But if they have, I know people who they have one party and a neighbor calls the cops. And it's like, okay, this is the only time that we've ever done this, and you're calling the cops like that. That's going to cause a tension between those neighbors who have to live next to each other for an extended period of time. So why would you needlessly create conflict when you could let it go one time or a couple of times? So don't be a witness against your neighbor without cause. Do not deceive with your words. Do not say, I will do to him just as he... So don't seek retribution against your neighbor, because it's only going to escalate. It's only when you get into a tit for tat, it's someone's going to lose an eye, someone's going to lose their life eventually, if it was to keep going, because there's only no one ever does things in a completely fair way. Verse 30. I passed. So this one goes down to verse 34. So this ends our chapter today. I passed by the field of a sluggard, by the vineyard of one who lacks wisdom. I saw that thorns had grown up all over it, and ground was covered with weeds, and its stone wall was broken down. When I saw this, I gave careful consideration to it. I received instruction from what I saw. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to relax, and your poverty will come like a bandit, and your need like an armed robber. Okay, so this one is really cool. The idea here is that no one ever thinks that I'm just going to let it get overgrown. I'm just going to let it get to the point where it's unmanageable. I'm going to let it get to an obvious point. No one ever thinks that. No one ever is really coming at life going, I'm just gonna forget about it until it's like a huge chore. I think about my grass, like my lawn outside. I like to do it once a week, maybe sometimes even in summer twice a week, because if I do it, if I leave it go more than a week, the catcher gets full very quickly, and I use an electric. I have an electric mower, and I don't like having to pause and charge the battery. I don't like having to stop, like start the job, and the battery dies, and I'm like, well, now I've got to wait for 2 hours for it to charge, and I like to do it in the afternoon, which means I've really got to wait till the next day for it to charge up. So that's what I don't like to do. But sometimes you're just like, either because of the rain or the rain is understandable. But if I'm like just I couldn't be bothered, today. I'll do it tomorrow. It grows a little bit bigger, and if you do that like several days in a row, all of a sudden you've gone past the point where you want to do it, and you go out there and you're like, it's struggling to do 3 lines before its catcher is full. Not really, but like and it taxes the battery, it taxes the motor, it taxes all of that. And so by those few days, it's just, and I never thought I'm gonna let it wait 3 days. No one ever thinks I'm gonna wait 3 days to do that thing that I should be doing today. They go, I won't do it today. And so it's when it gets to verse 33, and there's a great wisdom here in revealing what we actually do when we procrastinate. It's a little sleep. It's just a little sleep, just a little slumber. I'm just going to fold my hands to relax. Oh, it's too late today. I'll do it tomorrow. And then we do the same process and the same cycle all over again. Idleness is not a sin of it's not a sin of intentional inactivity. It's a sin of incremental procrastination that comes and grows bigger and bigger. So your poverty comes like a bandit. It sneaks up on you. It sneaks up on you that, okay, now it's 2 weeks, and look at the lawn now. And then you kind of get to the point where you're like, oh, do I want to tackle that now? Because now I'm going to have to charge. That's going to go through at least one charge of the mower. But I got to do it, because if I let it go for 3 or 4 weeks, and I have. There was a time when I was in between mowers, and it did get quite out of control. But and some of that was definitely my fault as well. Like when I got I didn't get onto getting a new mower with the efficiency I should have, and it was like a jungle. So like, get on with your tasks when you've got the time. Get on with it, because if you don't, poverty is going to come unawares. I really like this because of the depth of first, like the imagery that it evokes, and the depth of meaning within there. Yeah. Well, I hope that's been a blessing to you. I hope you've had a great evening studying the Bible with me. I hope you have a great Sabbath. It's the Sabbath today. And I would love to see you join us tomorrow at Border Church. I'd love to see you join us tomorrow night for another episode of this, where we've only got 7 chapters left. So we'll be back. We'll be finishing this on next Friday. So please join us for the remainder of this series. Please join us tomorrow. Tomorrow we're doing, like I said, the opening of 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 1 to 17, and every theme for the letter of the Corinthians is anticipated or deliberately mentioned in these first 17 verses, and more than that, there's this striking picture of the gospel, which I'll probably leave till the end of my sermon, but it's just this amazing thing when you see, like, just by the mention of one thing, when you see the background to that, and just what that means for what God can accomplish in a person's life, you'll be blown away. It's this beautiful picture of grace working out in relationships. So I'm chuffed to share that tomorrow. Have a great sleep. have a great day tomorrow if you're watching this, or whenever you watch this, and I will see you tomorrow. Father, just want to pray for everyone that they have a great night, great sleep, great Sabbath day, and that just thank you for these beautiful words in Proverbs chapter 24. I want to thank you for my favorite verse, just going through it again, and I've been over that verse so many times. I'm amazed that I learn more every time I open your word, even on something that is well-trod ground. So, Father, I just pray that you will help us to remember that we're just like anyone else. We all fall, we all trip over, we all stumble. But, Father, we always want to be the ones that cry out, Lord, help me. And we know that Jesus is right there. You know, he will transport, he will teleport to the point where he's reaching his hand down, even under the waves, to get us. So, Father, I just pray that everyone will have this assurance and this knowledge as they go forward from today. In Jesus' name, amen. Good night. See you tomorrow.